Hi, everybody. This is Dr. PetDoc Donna, Dr. Donna Kelleher. And today we have a really special event because I am going to be interviewing Dr. Richard Pitcairn, who is pretty much a legend in holistic veterinary medicine. Um, he is one of our teachers of veterinary homeopathy. So this is Dr. Richard Pitcairn's book. Maybe a lot of you have it on their shelves, How to Use Homeopathics to do things like clear vaccines, help clear vaccines so they don't cause as many problems down the road. So in this book he talks about using Thuya, Occidentalis, 30C, and we do that at the clinic and other homeopathics too. Thuya is a great one to help with. It says usually when you buy it, it says warts on it, and that's because that is a physical consolidation of toxins. So I'll probably try to show a picture of that. And then here are some of my homeopathic kits. So this is one I've had for a long time. It's a 200C. 200C is a practitioner strength or conventional medicine or our herbal medicine. We think of if it's more dilute, it's weaker. Well, in homeopathy, if it's more dilute, it's stronger because you're working on vibrational energy, and we're going to talk about that in the video. Here's another homeopathic kit I have. This one has mostly 30C and then just a few remedies at 200C. But if you guys get really into it, there's books like this from Dr. McLeod, and so it's a whole field of veterinary homeopathy. I find it to be difficult to use in chronic cases, but really wonderful in acute cases, GI cases especially. And Dr. Pitcairn and I talk about a number of remedies for different conditions. And so I hope you enjoy it. And I'm sorry I don't come up more on the audio in this video, in this interview, and that is because I haven't 100% figured out Zoom. So apologies. And if any of you guys have any directions for me, please comment, share, and of course, subscribe. Your subscription, even though it's free, it means a lot to me, and it keeps us going here doing these videos. Thanks so much. Dr. Donna here. Hey guys, I just wanted to also just tap you into, in the first 5 minutes of this interview is something super special, especially if you're a veterinarian or someone who works with animals in general. Dr. Pitcairn talks about a time in his career really early on in the interview where he felt like vet school didn't prepare him for veterinary medicine, and he kept getting all these failures when he was trying to treat animals with chronic disease. And so his answer was to get more education. He went and got a PhD in virology, and then eventually, of course, learned homeopathy, and now has been teaching homeopathy. But I just wanted to key you guys into the fact that it's not the veterinarians that are failing. It is the system. It's the whole educational system that needs to have a revamp, a change, something different. And so it's the vet schools themselves that I feel like are not preparing people properly, not teaching them how to handle chronic disease. And you really need to be open-minded about how to handle these cases, because the most success I've ever seen and had is when I use a multiple different types of holistic medicine. So that might be homeopathy, it might be herbs, it might be acupuncture, it might be diet. And it's almost like you're decorating a Christmas tree, with each of these types of therapies. So anyway, I just wanted to key you guys into that part of the interview. I thought it was probably one of the best parts of it. So thanks so much. I think this is good. So everyone, this is the most amazing holistic vet probably that we have. I'm so blessed to have Dr. Richard Pitcairn here with me today. And we are just gonna Dr. Pitcairn is like a legend. Of course, this is very influential for me. I have, this is the 1995 copy, and I know there's a fourth edition.
Yeah.
And I was gonna talk to you about a couple things in here if I can remember. But anyway, this is so many people got started with this book, and I'm not even sure that you're aware of all the people that you've influenced. But I know I was talking to one of my clients is Green Juju. She's Kelly. She owns a company called Green Juju, and they make she grinds vegetables. Yeah, and puts it with bone meal bone meal and bone broth, and sells it yours. So the
Yeah.
dogs get bone broth and vegetables in their food. And she said that
Right.
this book was her first
Hmm.
kind of like wake up call. And it was like, wow. And I go, that's so cool. So yeah. And for me, I know, I did my internship with Alan Schoen. I know you know Alan, and then and got this book almost at the same time, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's a whole movement! Yay! Makes sense to me. So anyway, thank you for that, and I might refer back to it. And of course, you wrote it, so I might have questions to ask you on that. But so the
Well,
first
I'll try.
yeah, thank you so much. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is just I read the book, the story in here about Tiny, but I like to ask everyone who's on with me, what was your first like kind of, I mean, and in regards to homeopathy, Tiny was a story that this book opened with that was basically a wake up call into diets and just offering a homemade diet and how much better that was for that little dog. And that was a wake up call for you. But what about homeopathy? How did that start for you? How did you basically, I mean, first get sort of struck with it? And was it a case? Was it on you yourself? I mean, if you don't mind sharing that, I thought that would be really cool for people.
Well, it's quite a story, of course.
Stories are great.
um, I had gone through veterinary school at UC Davis. 1965 is when I graduated. I went into practice in Southern California, mixed practice, for a couple of years or so. I think it was about 2 years. And so I had a lot of interesting experiences, farm animals, small animals. We even had a traveling zoo in the area that we used to take care of those animals
Wow.
best we could.
Right.
And so, but then I got an opportunity to go up to Washington State and join the faculty for a year.
At the
And
vet school?
yeah, at the vet school.
Whoa.
And I thought that would be interesting. And I felt like I needed to learn more than I knew because I, I was, how to put it, I came out of veterinary school with confidence because of what I'd been taught. When I actually practiced, it didn't work out quite as well as I had thought it would. And then, of course, I assumed it was my deficit.
Right. And this is
So
happening all the time today with the new young vets coming out. Yes.
yeah. So when I thought if I could go back to the school and learn more, that would be a real good opportunity. So I was kind of looking into that option, and I through a colleague of mine, I found out about a position there. So I applied for it, and I did go up to Washington. I did what I was given the position, and I went up to Washington. I was in the microbiology department, and I taught epidemiology and public health, and I ran the large animal clinic. What did they call it? I forget now. Where they bring the animals into the barn there. We
Yeah,
also
it
did
was yeah,
farm calls. Yeah,
yeah, it was the teaching hospital that we
yeah,
had.
yeah.
I went to that vet school, but anyway,
Oh, you did? Okay.
yeah, that's why I'm like completely shocked that they would have you up. I mean, that's amazing to me that you would be there. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just your. I was nothing extraordinary. I was just a veterinarian that had graduated. But anyway, I took the job, and then as part of the benefits, I guess you could say, of that position was that I could take free graduate courses up to 10 units during that time, which I did. I took virology, which I studied viruses, which I thought was fascinating. I learned so much about them I didn't know. And I worked in with helping to teach that in the sense of working in the laboratory part of it. And so anyway, it was an enjoyable year, but of course the year was going to give up after, it was only for a year. It wasn't like going on indefinitely. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And as the year was coming to, it's kind of funny. This was part of the story. It's kind of funny. as the year was coming to a close, I approached the biology professor saying, is there anything more like this I could study? I just really enjoy it. Thinking there might be another class next year and I could somehow find a way to stick around,
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't know. Let me look into it. And I thought that was kind of odd. He didn't know if he was going to have a class or not. But I said, okay. So I go back down to my office, and the next morning, the head of the microbiology department comes in and says, well, you're in.
Wow.
And I said, in what? They offered me a PhD program where I received
Is that where your PhD comes from? Because I was going to ask you that. Oh,
yeah.
I always
And
assumed it was in homeopathy for some reason. Okay, go ahead. That's
no, it
wonderful.
was
In
microbiology, and
Wow.
it was through NIH trainee program, and I got a small salary. And so anyway, I entered that program. I thought, what the heck? Why not? So I entered that, focusing first on viruses. It was a 6-year program for me. And I spent actually literally years growing viruses in laboratories, if you can believe it, in tissue culture.
Wow. Like what
Yeah.
viruses did you grow? I mean, just a name.
Oh, Gila was one we did a lot work with. I should say, maybe it would make sense to say, you have to have a topic or a focus on your graduate work. And I became very interested in how the immune system worked to support health. And that's where my focus shifted. So I used viruses to study how the immune system recognizes foreign material.
Wow.
And that was what I ended up doing then was eventually working with tissue culture. We had inbred strains of mice genetically. And I would combine the 2 strains in a tissue culture and see how the cells interacted and how they recognized each other.
And this is 1960, late 60s. I mean,
I finished my program in 72.
72. So yeah, I mean, things have probably come a long way since then, I imagine, but that's so cool. Maybe that was some of the early viral research. Was it, or
Well, it moved from viruses to more focus on the immune system.
like cell biology,
Yeah,
cell interaction?
how interferon acted, how the immune system recognized foreign material and how it responded to it. It was really fascinating. It's complex, but it's also just amazing how elegant it is.
Yeah. Did you work with any coronaviruses, like any animal coronaviruses then?
No corona.
Okay. Just
No,
curious on that.
no.
With
So then anyway, I did that program, and then when it ended, I went through a couple of years of hippie life, living in a teepee.
Wow. Those are the years I missed, where
Yeah.
I would love to do that. Well, no, I wouldn't want to live in a teepee unless there was heat, though, I have to say, and maybe a hot tub.
Well, it's
Okay.
surprising. And we built a suit teepee in this 20-foot diameter, and you can have a
Wow.
fire in it. It was
Oh,
amazing how I didn't live in it all full time. I lived in it probably half the time because we
cool.
traveled around a lot.
Where was this teepee? Was it in California or Washington,
We
or?
traveled with I built a rack on my car, and we started out the first 6 weeks we lived up on the Pacific coast of Vancouver Island.
Oh my gosh, Tofino, and
Yeah, by
it?
Tofino.
And boy, that would have been wild back then, because it's pretty kind of wild now. We took kayak out of there sometimes, or we used to.
Well, it wasn't too wild, but we did dance naked around the fire.
This is great. These are the details that are so vital to life. Okay, but how did you find homeopathy from teepee
Well,
life?
so then I'll skip the part about traveling around. We spent gosh, I don't know, maybe it was 6 months or more down to Mexico, and I've traveled all around all the US with our teepee.
Wow.
But anyway, that aside, I joined a commune for a few months. So then I went back into practice, and but I felt like, to put it simply, I felt like in spite of all my training, I still didn't know how to restore health very well.
Yeah.
And I kept looking for alternative. Maybe there's other methods, So I explored quite a few. I looked at different kinds of treatment, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, polarity therapy, color therapy, on and on, over a period of time. And I came across homeopathy. And it was kind of intriguing. It was sort of logical. Little book I read about it was sort of logical and kind of fit with what I'd learned and understood about stimulating the healing mechanisms
So
of the
what was
body.
that first book? Was that Flat Earth
Oh
Medicine?
gosh, no. It was something about treating dogs with homeopathy.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't remember. Yeah, and so it was really kind of an introduction. But anyway, I thought it was interesting to try to. I was, like I mentioned, those other methods that I had looked into. I was exploring this one for a while. You know, you look at it for a while and decide whether you want to persist or not. So I was doing that, and my wife and I were living basically on the edge of poverty
I
because I
know.
wasn't working at
A
that
lot of
time.
vets live like that. People don't realize a lot of vets live like that.
Yeah, so we were renting a bedroom at her ex-husband's house, and we
That might have been interesting.
it
Okay.
was interesting. It was friendly. Um, so I asked her. I said, can I order a box of remedies? I think it was $40 for a box of remedies, and she said, well, if you'll use it.
I think you've used it. Yeah.
So I
That's
said,
funny.
okay. So I ordered the box, and then after that, we went up to we were in California. We went up to Oregon for Thanksgiving, and I had my remedies with me. And on the way, I got the flu,
Hmm.
and I got pretty sick. And when we arrived, I just went to bed, headache, fever, nausea, all the usual stuff. And everybody else was in there laughing and celebrating, sitting at the table ready for Thanksgiving dinner. And here I am lying in bed miserable. And I thought, maybe homeopathy would help. So I made a real effort to get my little book out I had on it, a little original guide to using it. And I looked at flu and I saw a remedy that seemed to fit, and I took it. And believe it or not, within 20 or 30 minutes, I was normal. I went and sat at the table and had Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. Okay, so are you willing to share what the remedy was? Just so
It was gelsemium.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So anyway, that kind of really stimulated me, and I
Oh
began to
yeah, you're
study.
like, wait a minute, there's something to this. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I began to study more seriously, and as I got into it, it's kind of a funny thing, when how can I put it? There is a conflict between the basic understanding of homeopathy and what I'd been taught before, because the prior training I had, as I would say, is based more or less on the emphasis of physicality, materialism, and homeopathy is more like Chinese medicine, more emphasize the energetic components.
Yeah.
And you have to shift your consciousness. You can't just do both,
It's really hard. I know you're right. It is hard to live in both worlds. I see people try, and maybe some people can, I don't know, but me, it's just, yeah, I'm just all into the energy medicine. So,
Yeah. So anyway, I went back and forth with that for a year or so, trying to understand it, and then getting frustrated and giving it up. No, this is bullshit, and I'm not going to study it anymore. And then I come back, study some more.
yeah.
Then I started applying it somewhat in animals and seeing some results. Not always, but occasionally. So I could see that I was beginning to see effects from it. And there was one episode that happened, I remember, I have some memory of sitting there reading a book on it when I suddenly felt like I understood it. And from that point on, I was just totally
Just
focused on
hit
it.
you. It just
Yeah.
hit you.
Hmm.
What do you make of that? Is that just through
I think it was a
education?
shift of consciousness.
Yeah, but it's so amazing to you that it would happen in that instance for you.
Yeah. Well, of course, I had months, year or two of preparation to that point.
Building, yeah.
Building,
Okay,
yeah. So
cool.
anyway, that's kind of the story briefly. And so then from that point on, from about 1978 on, that was really a major interest for me.
And then I think most people don't realize that you are the main person that's taught just thousands of veterinarians across the country and the world how to use homeopathy, which is, it's so amazing to me, all the classes that you've taught and all the people that the teachers that you're teaching. I mean, it's a whole world that maybe people, the public,
Yeah,
isn't necessarily aware of, but um,
yeah.
yeah, what do you see as like kind of the future of homeopathy? Do you see it ever coming into the vet schools? Is that too much to ask? I mean, because that homeopathy's a little bit been left out. I mean, you have someone like Dr. Shea and bringing the herbal and the acupuncture into some of the vet schools. I'm thinking about like Gainesville, the Florida one, and some of the other ones are sort of doing some Chinese medicine. Somehow that's been embraced a little bit, but yet homeopathy, maybe not so much. I just wanted to know kind of what you thought maybe a path forward could be in our profession.
Yeah, that's
And
a
of
good
course, our
question.
profession's having a lot of problems right now that maybe holistic medicine could solve in
Mhm.
a lot of ways. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to get your take
Yeah.
on that.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer though. It's an odd thing. And what I mean by that is, as we were talking about a little bit ago, homeopathy, it's a story in itself. It didn't start out with an idea. It was a discovery by the doctor
Hmm.
that came across the,
Dr. Hahnemann or
yeah, Samuel Hahnemann over 200 years ago. And I won't go into that now, but it was a discovery unexpectedly that how it worked. And as he explored it and developed it over, 40 or 50 years of his work with it, it moved gradually to an emphasis more on that we are not just physical beings, but we have an energetic component he called the life force or the vital force that runs the show, so to speak.
Mhm.
Well, this is very much like Chinese medicine that talks about the qi, right?
Yep.
So as I said earlier, it's in contradiction to the more materialistic view that's dominant today, which is why it's often criticized, you know. So, but here's the odd thing, that Chinese medicine, in spite of it saying more or less the same story, that there's an energy behind our physical form that is responsible for its maintenance, its growth, and so on, its recovery from disease.
Mm.
And Chinese medicine and acupuncture, to a very great extent, has been accepted in the veterinary profession. But then when homeopathy says a very similar thing, that there is an energetic component, they don't call it qi, they call it the vital force or the life force, that can be affected by using medicines in a certain way, they just reject it totally and make fun of it.
And is that across the board? Are there any, I mean, I mean, are you finding that everywhere?
Everywhere, you mean every country?
Every maybe not every country, because I would assume some countries are a lot more open, but like just in America, all the vet schools are equally disinterested in homeopathy at this time.
Well, as far as I can tell, I haven't monitored all the schools, but there's a lot of criticism of homeopathy. Even now, there's an active movement to basically shut it down here.
Right. And I want to speak against that quite a bit here, because we do not have that many megaphones. As you know, this is maybe one of them. So, I mean, the thing about homeopathy that I find so amazing is how well it works. When it works, how well it works, how quickly, how almost with like a precision that herbs take time most of the time to work like that. Not
Right.
always, but so I mean, just a quick, like kind of quick little story with me. I treated this. So there was a horse next to my horse in a barn that had a huge swollen head. This horse's head, I've never seen a horse have a head. He had a reaction to the West Nile vaccine, and he wouldn't eat because he couldn't eat because he couldn't chew. And so what happened was they gave him for 5 days, they gave him Benadryl and steroids, and they couldn't give him much steroids because they didn't want to cause laminitis and all this stuff. And then finally I came in and I said, "What's wrong with that horse? He's not eating." And they said, "Well, he had a West Nile vaccine reaction." And I said, "Well, why didn't anyone tell me?" And I had Apis 200C in my car. I gave him like 3 pellets in his swollen little face, in his little lip. And 20 minutes later, this oozing, this kind of like sebum oozed a little bit from his pores. And I thought, ooh, and I gave him another remedy and another remedy. And I did like maybe 3 remedies. I don't know if I did it right. According to someone who knows a lot like you, I just knew we have to do something fast. And do you know, within an hour that horse was eating, he wasn't totally normal, but in a few hours his face was normal. And it's like, wow. I mean, what there is, like, to me, no other treatment like that. So
Mhm.
what we should be doing, instead of shutting it down, if we're truly looking objectively at science, is we should say, okay,
what is happening? Like, you know, like, let's study it. Let's not shut it down. If we shut something down, we'll never get to the root of how
Right.
something works. I mean, if somebody asks you, who's such an really an expert in homeopathy, what do you say when someone says, how does homeopathy, what is the mechanism of action for homeopathy, in your opinion?
Well, before we go there, can I ask you,
Yeah.
what was the reaction to the people around the horse and the veterinarian there?
Okay. Um, Embarrassment. um, um, because of course I declined the West Nile vaccine for my horse. So shock. The owner called me and was like, I don't know what you did, but thank you. I mean, there's a disconnect emotionally, you know, but I think everybody was just shocked.
Was there anybody interested in homeopathy and wanted to study it?
No, it was like, it was almost like they thought I did a magic trick and they
Hmm.
couldn't do it. It wouldn't be a
Hmm.
possible thing for them to do. And I'm sitting there going, you guys just need to, I mean, if you're going to do these vaccines, if you're, you know, to me, they're experimental vaccines. And if you're going to do them, and you need to have a little arsenal of things to help if there is a problem,
Oh, yeah,
you know. Anyway, yeah,
right,
it was
right.
an incredible story. I have so many homeopathy stories, and I'm not what I tell everyone, I'm not an expert in it. I'm not even, you know, schooled properly. And I want to take like your course, but like as soon as I decided I wanted to take it, we had the pandemic. And I'm like, so anyway,
I
one of these
know,
days I'll do it. But
I
it was just
know,
such a
yeah.
cool, it was such a cool outcome.
Yeah,
Taking
it's
that
sad
horse.
how that was shut down, the training.
Yeah. And that was shut down. I know. It was like
Mhm.
homeopathy, boom, just the blinders go on, you know?
Right, right. Well, back to your question, how does it work? I think is what you're asking, basically, right?
We can just share with people that, you know, it works. So let's just dive into maybe how.
Well, it's going to seem odd to people, but let me go back to the origin. Would make sense, I think. Dr. Hahnemann's. He was a medical doctor, and when he went into practice, this is in an area that's now Germany. At that time, it wasn't Germany; it was Saxony or someplace like that before
Mm.
there was a country.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
But he was a medical doctor practicing in a few years, and he but he just became discouraged, like we've been talking about, because of inconsistency of results.
This is in
And
1880s, right?
yeah, I guess so, over
Long
200
time.
years ago. Yeah,
Mm.
I forget the exact date, but that sounds about right. Yeah, and because medicines at that time were there wasn't a scientific method of determining medicine use. It was based on astrology,
Mm.
religion, um, what herbalists and others had said to do. In other words, authority and opinion, but there really wasn't any kind of like evidence. If you understand what I mean, the
Yeah.
difference. Yeah. And typically the medicines that were used were complex. It wasn't unusual to have 50 things in one formula. And medicines could only be made for pharmacists, not by doctors.
Mm. Interesting.
So anyway, Hahnemann decided, no, I don't. He wrote a letter. It's really interesting to read. Very has a lot of impact. Where he talks about basically to a friend, I just can't keep doing this to people without knowing if I'm hurting them or not. So I'm going to
Hmm.
withdraw from medicine for a while.
Wow.
And he made a living. He knew 7 languages, so he translated medical texts from other languages. That's how he made his living. But on the edge of poverty, he had family. Um, he had ended up in a small place with children, and so the only time he could work was at night. So he'd stay up every other night and work on his books. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
so anyway, at one point he was translating this book by a doctor in Scotland, um, William Cullen, I think is the name, and who was kind of like a big authority internationally.
Mm.
You know, respected doctor. And there was this more recently an herbal substance, a bark of a tree from Peru
Mm.
that
Sunshine.
had been brought by missionaries back to Europe, and it was found to be very effective for treating. swamp fever, they called it, which
Was
is
it
like
malaria?
like malaria, yeah.
Yeah.
But unusually so, you see, it stood out from the other medicines. So Hahnemann was translating what William Cullen said about the use of this particular herbal bark, and Cullen said the reason it acted as it did is because the term that was used was it was a stomachic, which meant it stimulated the stomach, and it was very bitter. And Hahnemann writes in the margin, the comment, that didn't really, I don't remember exact words he used, but basically that didn't really compute for him because there's other herbs that are more bitter and they don't do anything. So interestingly, this is what was unique about Dr. Hahnemann, you see. What was unique for him was that he said, I'm going to try it myself.
Yeah.
And he made up a tea of it. And he started drinking it to see what it would do during a day or two, every few hours. And he developed the symptoms of the fever, of the swamp fever. He developed the fever and the sweats and the weakness and all the other stuff. And he thought.
And was that a quinine toxicity, do you think?
I don't know if it was, they found later that quinine was in that. It's called cinchona bark.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was just that.
Okay.
I don't know if quinine would do that actually by itself. I've never read whether it's been tested. So, but the thing is that he then thought, if this is so effective, maybe it's because somehow it duplicates the symptoms and acts like some kind of a stimulus to the body. That was the idea he had. Well, he started testing that idea. He didn't know, it was just an idea. And he started testing it and with other substances, medicines that were used, that at that time, herbs that were used primarily to see if in other words, what I mean by testing it, he started with himself and his family and then other doctors that became interested, and they would take it just as I described in some form, usually in a very low dose, very, very low dose, but repeat it to see what symptoms would be produced. Mm-hmm. And he established a standard that was to be done only in healthy people. Mm-hmm. Because if you mix it with symptoms, it's confusing.
Yeah.
So it was very scientific. He said to find out how medicines act, healthy people test it.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful standard that's still not used today.
Wow, it'd be hard for them to find healthy people today. But anyway, that's a side thing. Okay.
So he did this for 12 years.
12 years.
And then he finally was confident enough that he went ahead and started communicating it and teaching it.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the beginning. Now, as time went on, and he found the necessity to reduce the dose and so on, and I'll just jump ahead without going into all the detail here, but he eventually came to the conclusion that it acts not on a physical level, but on an energetic level.
Yeah.
And that it stimulates the body to heal because it duplicates the disturbance on an energy level. And when it does that, it basically cancels out the original influence. That's what he says in his writings.
That's
but
awesome.
The medicine doesn't last. So once you stop the medicine, then the effect stops and then you're healthy.
Wow.
Does that make any sense at all?
It makes total sense. And I just feel like it's so powerful. It's so, just even that explanation of it. I mean, and now that you say this, I've read, I think maybe even in your book, I don't know, I kind of read that, but it's nice to, maybe not quite to that. So energy, I mean, I guess, what is energy to you? Like, what does it mean? Because and was he the first one to use the word vital force?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not certain.
Because I use it now and I feel like it's kind of mainstream almost, but.
Maybe it came from Paracelsus. I'm not real certain about that, but I've never read it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Okay. But he basically says that the body is an instrument, that the energy of the life force, which is, I'm using the word energy because people understand that term, but the way he describes it, it's not just an electromagnetic energy. It's more of a spiritual.
Yeah.
Non-physical.
It's the shen that you can see in someone's eyes, right? When you look at
Hmm.
their, I mean, I don't know if you could define it the same way, but like that's how I think of it, is like I look in someone's eyes and 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 what's sad to me now is I look in people's eyes and I feel like, just because of everything with the pandemic and lots of political things around the pandemic, it's just like people, I see less. You almost have to look to children to see that energy. I mean, feel like there's a lot of forces at work just against that vital force, and you can see it in people's eyes,
Yeah,
that reflection. But
yeah,
um, well, that's so
yeah.
cool.
So,
So
that's where the problem is. So people, medicine isn't the medicine of today ignores. In fact, it's interesting, just to give you some idea of the support for that statement. As you know, over 100 years ago, physics was transformed by quantum physics, because physics was the most material science, right? It was looking into what is matter, how is the world made up, going down into smaller and smaller parts of it until they got down to it. They talked about atoms, and right, and atoms combining to make molecules, and so on and so on. Well, the thing is that when they started to go a little deeper into that, like, well, what is an atom made of? They found out that it's not physical. It's an influence or an energy that doesn't exist in time-space continuum. And atoms appear in our experience, but the energy behind them is what is the reality.
mm,
Okay,
yes,
so that's really amazing, and quantum
amazing.
physics is a basis for all of our technology now. But here's what's interesting is that medicine of today ignores it. It's still
Oh,
based on Newton's physics, which is
wow.
materialistic.
Yeah.
How could medicine ignore such an important finding? And I have quotes. I didn't prepare them here for you today. I have quotes from some of the major quantum physicists that got Nobel Prize, where they say that the idea of basically the physical world as a physical reality at base is not true. That we really that the field behind it, like Einstein said, the field of energy is what's real, and the physical part is a manifestation of it. I mean, that's amazing,
It's
isn't
completely, it blows my mind. I have to sit there and think about it for hours to even partially digest it.
it?
But if you have those quotes, you can email them and then I can put them, I can include them as just, I can write them
Oh,
out
okay.
if you want to, but
I can look and see if I have them somewhere.
yeah, cool. Well, back to the just nitty gritty of homeopathy. So if people were to ask you, hey, I don't want to have a whole kit with me in my first aid kit. Could I just pick like 5 or 6 remedies that maybe I could have in my kit? What would you say? What would your answer
Well, I
be?
think the simplest thing is treating injuries,
Yeah.
because they're kind of straightforward and obvious. And whereas some of them, other diseases are complex and difficult to figure
More
out.
chronic diseases. And I
Yeah,
guess I was thinking acute things,
yeah.
problems.
So yeah, remedies like arnica for injury, or rust tox, or hypericum, and those kind of remedies. But you can get these little kits for not very much money, and they have maybe,
Is there one
maybe
company that you recommend people get kits from?
oh gosh, I'm not up to date on that. There's a number of different companies that have them.
Because we have one
Uh,
from Washington
oh yeah, yeah, that would be
homeopathy,
good.
homeopathics,
Yeah,
but
there's
yeah.
Hahnemann Labs too.
Oh, Hahnemann Labs, is that in America or
That's in California.
in California? Hahnemann
Mhm.
Labs, okay. And then there's the company Boron, that's
Yeah,
unique.
but I don't know that they're not exactly a pharmacy in that sense. I mean, they're a pharmacy, but I don't know if I'm not sure if you can get a kit ordered directly from them.
Okay, okay. Well,
But
those would be cool.
there are a number of them. Yeah, and so you get these little emergency kits, and they're nice, 30 or 40 remedies, and
Yeah.
then you get a little book on how to do it, an introductory book.
Yeah, I have 2 kids, so
Yeah,
I love those.
it's useful.
And
Mhm.
do you think of 30C kit? I have one
Sure.
kit with 30C and then it has like 10 remedies with 200C. 200C's, for everyone who doesn't know, is a stronger remedy. It's more of a practitioner strength remedy. 30C is an average.
I would say 30C be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
practical for most instances.
Yeah, and so the injury, when you say injury, so sprain and strain for Arnica, Arnica montana 30C, uh, Russ talks more ligament type stuff. I'm kind of just reading into
Yeah, arnica corresponds to injuries of more of the muscles and tissues like that in the skin.
Mhm.
Russ talks for injuries to joints,
Okay.
ledum, injuries to tendons,
I
hypericum
never use
injuries to.
lead for tendons. Maybe I'm doing a disservice. I didn't really realize that. Like, so a CCL, like a cruciate rupture type thing.
Well, it
Lead?
could be. It may, that it could be part of the treatment. Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, it depends. You have to read the remedies, the
right. It's
symptoms.
right.
Hypericum is very useful where areas that have a lot of nerves are injured, like fingers and toes and mouth and
Yep.
yeah, so stuff like that.
What do you think about homeopathy for digestive issues? I mean, I use them a lot and I know, but of course you have to be careful in case, what if you're treating this dog for, constipation and you find out later, oh, well, he swallowed this huge ball, so, there's reasons not to, but in
Well, there's a
general,
remedy. Even if they do that, that remedy can help them get rid of it. I have a good
yeah.
example story.
Oh, good. I love
My
stories.
daughter's dog. I shouldn't mention her.
Well, you could say somebody that you know, and we won't know any different.
Yeah, somebody I know.
There you go.
Her dog apparently had started to develop a digestive problem, and the cause was not known. But anyway, possible he'd eaten something that seemed like, because he had that tendency to eat stuff, and so there is a remedy for that, where like phosphorus is often used when there's foreign body in the stomach and so on. So anyway, I gave him a remedy and he passed a tampon.
Well, there you go. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, to them, it makes sense. They're like, hey, free food. I mean,
But the remedies will help the body
Yeah.
deal with it as much as it's capable. It's not like
Yeah.
infinite, but
Yeah, I know we've used dandelion root tincture for
oh yeah,
foreign bodies and had some results there. So, but yeah, it's but there's a lot of but no, I'm just thinking more kind of in the line of like inflammatory bowel disease, so the dogs kind of intermittently get a low grade regurgitation or a low grade vomiting, that sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's more of a chronic disease,
So
and certainly homeopathy can help, but it's just more difficult to figure out the remedy.
right.
See,
And
one
this is
part of
where
the
going to a practitioner that's been through your course is really helpful if you can even go in person. I just don't know if is anyone repertorizing like for people over Zoom? Any doctors
oh,
doing that?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know.
I mean, do you think that's doable?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because what you do is,
I'll try to
if you,
find out resources for people.
well, I have on my website, I have a referral listing.
Okay. Yeah. And I maybe
Yeah.
see if there's anyone that would work remotely, because that's part of people's problems is we're getting fewer and fewer holistic vets. It's not, I think it's not a question of belief. I think that the vets coming out say, yep, we understand what you're talking about. It's more a question of dollars and cents and taking training.
I know. It's
And I don't
unbelievable. I
know
don't know
what
what's
to
happened.
do. Yeah. Well, the money part has corrupted.
That's what I mean. It's like, I know some of the vets that have come out with debt of $250,000, $300,000. And what's amazing is now, I know it goes back a ways, but when I went through veterinary school, as I say, graduated in 65, I worked in the summers and I worked in a carnival on the weekends during the summer. Yeah, it was.
Digestive issues. No.
I did that down in
was
Los
fun.
Angeles. It was not a traveling carnival. It was, but I ran the Ferris wheel and the merry-go-round.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fun.
So anyway, I worked summers and I worked, even weekends. At one year, I worked at Chicken Ranch during the weekends to earn money for my tuition and so on. And my tuition at that time was $400 a semester.
I mean, it's just
I
shocking.
paid for everything.
I mean, that's how far things have gotten out of control. I think they've just gotten out of control. I see the vet schools, I think they waste a lot of money on things that the kids don't, I should say kids, but the young vet students don't necessarily need to know, and
Uh,
don't spend enough time on what they really need to know, which is a lot of how to take care of yourself. How
yeah.
have you managed the work? Because you've done so much. It's shocking. I mean, but how have you managed the work balance? You know, they say that that's one of our biggest problems as a profession, and of course, this money problem doesn't help. But do you have any
Right.
advice for the work
Well,
balance?
I had a homeopathic practice in Eugene, Oregon for about 20 years, and I did just homeopathy and nutrition, but I also was teaching.
I
So I was
know.
pretty
I
busy.
remember those days because I would see
Yeah.
you at the conferences, blown away
Yeah.
that
So
you
I was
have.
pretty busy at that time. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if I have an easy answer until I finally decided to retire from the practice. But yeah, I think it's important that you don't overwork, because then you get too stressed and you can't think and you get vulnerable to illness and so on.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I only work 3 days a week, except for once a month where I work five. But anyway, yeah, it's trying to just take those days. Like this is a day off for me, you know. But I feel like with the young kids, you know, like they feel like they have these big debts, and then they, you know, get signed on with the corporations, and then that's a 5 day a week thing. And so it's weird though, because I feel like, you know, I worked in this practice in Chicago, and we saw like 50 people a day. We never turned anyone away. Vets are turning people away now. But back then we never were allowed to. But you know, our appointments, we would do everything in like 5 minutes, and it would be like, it would maybe not be like, you know, your optimum level of medicine, but like I feel like we would leave at the end of the day and be like, great, we impacted a lot of lives. We helped a lot of people, and maybe they
Right.
were simple, you know, we weren't working everything up. I mean, I feel like now the clients just feel like, gosh, everything just gets tested and
Yeah.
worked up and
Yeah.
tested and worked up, and and that's driving a lot of money. But then it's not always, you know, I didn't know what was so wrong with just, you know, giving an animal a remedy when you first see a problem. Why is liability and everything just driven it to like these ultimate, you know, we have to do like an MRI in order to just rule out X, Y, and Z. Why can't we just try, like, if it's a medicine, if it's a conventional medicine, or if it's a remedy, or if it's an herb, like try it first for a day or two, kind of see where you're at and see if the body can heal on its own or with a little help, without running all these tests so fast, you know. I just
Yeah.
really, I'm sort of disturbed by that trend. And yeah, I know that's a corporate trend, but what do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, I think it's the profession has really shifted, as I said earlier, how low tuition was. And
Yeah.
veterinarians at that time, that, well, for the years following that I was um, experienced, it was not unusual for a veterinarian to build a practice where there was some worked alone. They liked that. But many of them that would develop a practice with several veterinarians in it. And then eventually, when they got old enough, they would sell the practice to somebody, and they
Right.
would live off that final income that they got from the practice, right?
Right. I
That's not
remember
the
it.
way it is anymore.
It wasn't that long ago, you
Now
know.
you have to sell to a corporation.
Yeah, I mean,
Now the corporations run the show.
yeah, is it just the money part so high?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder where it's heading though, because at some point it's going to break the piggy bank. I call it the piggy bank, but you know, when you're talking
Mhm.
about, like, I mean, around here it's like $4,000, $6,000 if you're just like a couple of days at the ER, because of course they say they have to run all the tests, and it's like, I just wonder at some point when and maybe it's already happening, where people are like, okay, we're not going to vets anymore, which is not okay. I mean, you
Right,
know, on
right.
any level, not for the animal either.
Yeah.
So I wonder how we can take that back.
Well, I think it's it would take basically, to be really honest about it, we have to say it's going to have to take a change of our view of reality, change of consciousness.
Yeah.
We're moving more and more towards the emphasis on physical information. And as we're talking about here with homeopathy and Chinese medicine and other methods, they what comes from them is that the physical is the effect. And so you see detail about the physical condition, but it doesn't tell you what the problem is or how to solve it.
Yes.
And that's why I think medicine is moving more and more that way, because it's not solving it. And it thinks that if it goes further, it will solve it, which I think is a mistake.
I know it, you almost wonder like how far it will go. And I guess just you and I understand what each other's talking about, but we're also just to share with people what, I mean, maybe they understand, but like we're talking about, more and more testing for human
Mhm,
medicine too, like
mhm.
testing being conventional testing, like CT scans, MRI. Now, sometimes those things are really great. Like if there's a brain tumor, you kind of want to know, or that type of stuff. But so often it's like, yeah, you have a sore elbow. Do you need 5 MRIs, or could you get a little acupuncture, maybe a little arnica or whatever other remedy and see how that, goes?
Yeah,
Rest and, PT, or I don't know. I just feel like I feel like those things should happen first, and just common sense wise. But
right, right.
well, is there anything else we have a few minutes left. Is there anything you want to say to people? New vets
Well,
coming
I
out.
should explain that it's just to emphasize that the idea behind homeopathy is that if you can find a medicine, a substance, it could be an herb or a mineral or an animal product, but when you give it to a person that's not ill, the testing process we've talked about, that pattern of symptoms, once it's determined, can be matched to the symptoms occurring from let's say we say a naturally occurring disease, say from a virus or toxin or something. And that's essential. That's the basic principle, is matching the two. Because when you match them, the second one you give, which can be made stronger, cancels out the first one. You see, on an
Yeah.
energetic level. Well, that's also a limitation for homeopathy, because you have to be able to, you might have the information about how substances were tested, but when you're faced with your patient, you have to determine what the pattern of illness is. It's not based on diagnosis. You have to look at, if it was a human, you'd say, well, where's your pain and what's it feel like? Is it throbbing? Is it burning? Is stabbing pain? And, when does it occur? And what makes you feel better, and so on. You can do a similar thing in animals through observation and touching and examining them. You can find out where the pain is, and you can see how they act, what positions they take, and so on.
Yeah.
So it's similar, but the thing is that the information that's needed to be successful with homeopathy has to be a accurate observation of the pattern of illness in the patient. So that's the limitation, because if the person hasn't observed, and they can't tell you what, you can look at the animal for a few minutes, but you can't get the whole story. You have to have them as a witness, So that's sometimes the problem. You have to send people home and say, okay, observe for a day and tell me what you see in detail. And some people won't do that.
Yeah.
They want immediate results.
Yeah.
The other thing that's part of that's a complication is if they've received a lot of treatment with
Right.
drugs and
Conventional
things.
treatment or herbal
Yeah,
treatment.
conventional treatment, because now they've altered the symptoms. So
Yeah.
now what you can determine isn't really accurate anymore. You see the
Right.
problem?
Yes.
So sometimes what a homeopathic practitioner has to do in a chronic case that's been going on for, say, years, sometimes what they have to first do is treat them in a way to kind of neutralize the prior treatment and get back to the original pattern.
That is so complicated.
It is complicated. You have
How
to
long
be,
does that take? I mean, do you?
it could take a few months sometimes in some cases.
Yeah.
And people have to be patient with it.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
that's the problem. They don't want to be oftentimes.
Yeah. I mean, some
So,
people can be, but you're right.
yeah,
We live in a now culture.
yes, people want immediate results. And the problem is, of course, you can't always get
And
immediate
that's why we end
results.
up suppressing symptoms as we do, instead of trying to find underlying causes
Right.
and correct them. We just suppress inflammation.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
right.
No, that's good. That's all really good information. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Gosh, and I just think like, what's new? What's going to be new for you on the horizon? You did your 4th edition. You guys are doing any other books or
We're not
any
planning
new
anything
projects?
now.
Just kind of
No, I'm
retired
getting
and
too old, I think. I turned 81 this May.
oh my gosh, you just look amazing. That's
Oh, well,
amazing.
thank you. But, I don't think I have the time and energy to do another book.
Yeah, I know books are tough, right? Wow.
Yeah. They are a lot of work. This last edition, we rewrote it over a year's time. Over half of it was rewritten.
Well, one of the things that Dr. Lemon said, and of course he retired, I think it was like at 84. I did an interview with him not too long ago, and he said, now I'm going to get into permaculture.
Oh,
And we were like, wow, okay. And Dr. Lemon's going to get in. He's like, I can't wait. I saw this video on this guy who just plants in chips. And I'm like, wow. So so I just kind of,
plants and chips.
yeah,
What do you mean?
he has like alder chips, I think they are, that just kind of slowly break down. And as they
Oh,
break down, he puts his plants in there and then of course limits what slugs can get. I mean, we have a lot of slugs here, so slugs and weeds and so it was so cute. Dr. Lemon was like, "Oh man, that's my next thing," because he was selling his practice after 55 years of having it,
is
54
that Michael
years of
Lemon?
having. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he lives, just down in Renton. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I haven't heard from him for a while.
yeah, I know. I wish we need to do the Council of Elders or something, get everyone together. It'd be fun because he's just a riot. He's just and I feel like someone like that and someone like you that has just kind of given and given and helped and just trained like all kinds of vets coming into it now. It's just been so valuable. So I really thank you for all that.
Sure.
All right, we'll go ahead and say goodbye and
Okay.
have people do some comments and shares and questions and everything. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bye. Thanks, Dr. Pitcairn. Leave meeting, and
Thank you so much for joining me for this interview with Dr. Pitcairn. I hope you got a lot out of it. And sorry we start talking about these intricate energetic systems, but I think that in the future we're going to figure out the science behind those, and people are going to be a lot more open-minded to them. And so here we are in 2022, and sometimes I think it feels like we're in 1822. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and please share, subscribe. Subscribing is your best payback for us, and comment. And so thanks so much, everybody.